I just had a near-death experience here in Idaho, and I'm going to tell you the full story of what happened and how you can avoid ending up in a similar situation. Before we get started, my name is Isaac Crace. I work, live, and play here in Idaho and document my experiences along the way to help guide people on their quest to enjoy Idaho. So if you or anyone you know is thinking about making the move to the Great Gem State, let's connect and make that dream come true. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode because as you know from the title, I have got a great video in store for you guys. So without further ado, let's get started with the story. So I'm going to give a bit of a backstory for those of you who aren't familiar with me, myself. I live in Idaho, I've grown up in Idaho, and I love being outdoors, be it hunting, fishing, anything outdoors, whether it flies, walks through the mountains, or swims through the streams, I'm chasing it. So I'm getting ready for my upcoming elk hunt in the middle of October. And through the process of that, I like to go up to where I'm going to be hunting earlier before the season starts to just see what's going on. It's called scouting. So what my buddies and I plan to do is we're going to go up to where we're going to be elk hunting and we're going to do some scouting. Typically when we go up there, I have a cargo trailer that we stay in. It's got metal sides. It is a great little rig to take up with us. But for this outing, we decided we were just going to take a couple tents as it wasn't going to be getting very cold at night, only about 40 degrees. And for ease of just quickness, it was going to be a lot quicker just to take the tents. We wouldn't have to deal with the trailer and all that stuff. So we got our tents. We got everything all loaded up to head up to the mountains on Friday. And we got out of town a little bit late. So by the time we got to where we were going to be scouting, it was already pitch black. It was like 11 o'clock or 10:30, something like that. Pitch black outside. So we're driving through the mountains. We weren't going to be camping in a campsite. We're just going to be out in the forest on a wide spot of the road, of the little forest roads, and we're going to pitch our tents right there and camp. I've done it plenty of times before. So we get up to where we're going to be camping. I haven't camped in this exact spot before, but I've been around the area. I've hunted around the area multiple times. So we get in there, and I notice as we're pulling in, there's a little camp set up off the road to the next of us. It's a wall tent. For those of you who don't know, it's canvas colored. So even though it was pitch black, you could still see there was an outline of a tent there. I couldn't tell if anybody was staying there, but we decided, hey, we're just going to go up to the next pullout, which was about 20 yards up the road and on the other side of the road. So we get up there, we turn the pickup into the campsite where we're going to be setting up our tents so that we have light. We set up our tents. Like I said, it's like 11 o'clock, and we're crawling to the tents to get ready to go to sleep because we're going to be getting up early the next morning, about 5:45 to get to where we're going to be hiking to do our scouting. And so we go to sleep. It gets cold that night to about 40 degrees, but inside my sleeping bag, I was actually really comfortable. And about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was jolted awake. And I don't exactly know why at the time I was jolted awake, but it was just one of those things where you're completely asleep and then it was like, boom, I'm awake now. And I don't know why I'm awake. And I'm like, that's interesting. So I'm laying in bed and I can hear something walking around outside of my tent. But it was so faint to the point I wasn't sure if I was making it up in my head or if it was just leaves rustling or something like that. You know, when you're outside and it's dark, your mind just starts to wander. So I'm laying there in my bed or on my cot and I'm hearing this and I'm like, I'm just going to grab my handgun, which was laying over next to me on the floor. And I couldn't quite reach it from the way I was sitting. So I had to like unzip my sleeping bag a little bit. And I didn't want to make a ton of noise because if it was something, I didn't want to make a ton of noise. And my sleeping bag is kind of a vinyl-y material and the cot padding is kind of vinyl. So as you're moving, it's creating a lot of noise. So I reach over and I grab my .380 that was sitting on the ground next to me. And I'm sitting there in bed just listening as to what's going on outside the tent. And I can hear the footsteps getting closer and closer and closer to my tent. And then on the opposite side of the tent from where my head is, so right here, I can hear something sniffing. And I'm like, ooh, I really don't like this. I was like, I don't know what to do. Again, I have a gun in my tent, but it's like, what am I going to do? Just shoot a hole through my tent? And I don't know exactly what it is at all. It could have been a deer, could have been an elk, something like that, or maybe even a cow, but automatically your mind starts to wander. And I was confident that it was a bear because it came into the camp. Bears are known to do that. I didn't have any food in my tent, so there was no reason for the bear to come into the camp unless it was just curious. So my buddy is in the tent next to me, and I grab my phone. I sent him a text message. I was like, hey, wake up. There's something outside of the tent. And he wasn't getting it. He was fast asleep, didn't wake up, didn't hear anything. So I was like, I need to get his attention so we can brainstorm what to do. I don't just want to wake him up with a gunshot. That'd be kind of a terrible way to wake up. So what I did was I picked up my phone and I dialed his number and I rang, and I just let the phone ring one time, and then I hung up so that his phone would buzz one time. And as I heard his phone buzz, I heard him ruffling around in his tent, and he responds to my text. So we're texting back and forth for what felt like 10, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. We're discussing nuclear talk, but it was probably over the matter of like 10 seconds. And we came to the conclusion that I needed to make some noise. So I sat up on my cot inside of my tent and I yelled, "Hey bear." And then I unzipped my tent a little bit, pointed the gun out into the ground, and I fired around. And we didn't hear anything take off, which I thought was kind of weird, and it played into the idea that maybe I was just imagining things. So we both got out of our tents and we're looking around. It's pitch black outside. It's 3 a.m, like I said. It's cold. We have our little lanterns, so we're looking around. I'm looking for tracks to see if I can see any tracks of what was around the tent, and I can't find any, which I thought was odd. Again, and then my buddy, he didn't see anything, so he's probably thinking, okay, my friend is just out of his mind, and I really am not safe in the woods with him with a gun. Anyways, that's besides the point. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to be able to go back to sleep for another couple hours because that was way too much of an adrenaline rush. I'm kind of shaken. It's like you have I don't know, a monster right to wake up, or not that I've ever had a monster. But anyways, so he goes right to sleep because he thinks I'm just imagining stuff. So I'm laying in bed for, I don't know, I couldn't go to sleep for a while. So I just laying in my cot with my handgun like this on my head, just, waiting for whatever it was to come back, if it was going to come back, trying to fall asleep. So I'm waking up every 10 minutes or something like that. And then finally 5:45 rolls around. We get up, we get out of our tents. So I get dressed and I'm looking around now because I'm more awake and alert. And I'm looking to see if I can find any tracks anywhere around. I was scouring around all outside my tent and I couldn't see anything. So I was starting to think that maybe I was just kind of losing it or imagining it. So we go about our day. We do our hunt, or not our hunt, but our scouting adventure. We hiked probably, I don't even know, 8, 9, 10 miles up steep terrain. I mean, it's Idaho. It is not fun terrain to hike in here, especially in the Rocky Mountains. And so we go through our hunt, our scouting adventure, and we got back to the truck. We're driving around, and this older gentleman pulls up on a side-by-side or a Razor, Polaris, a Gator, whatever you may be familiar or know it as. And he says, "Hey, are you guys the ones that are in those 2 green tents on top of the ridge?" And my first initial thoughts when he said that was kind of, why are you saying it like that? And he was like, well, I just wanted you guys to know that you need to be careful because there's a mountain lion up there on that ridge and it got into the camp. It's been getting into the camp next to you. And I was like, oh, good to know. So maybe I was not imagining things. And remember I had said that there was that camp across the street, that sheep herder's tent, that wall tent. That's the camp that it had been getting into. And this gentleman had let us know that he had actually shot at that mountain lion earlier in the morning because it snuck around on him and it got about 10 feet away from him. So he turned and shot at it with his handgun, but he missed and it took off. Big mountain lion. He said it was a couple-year-old Tom. And anyway, so we go about our day. My buddy and I are talking about it throughout the day, whether we should stay there or not. We weren't positive whether we should feel good about it or not that it wasn't a bear, because like I said, bears will come into your camp to just get into your tent, but I don't think a mountain lion would come and try and get into my tent. So we were like, okay, we're probably okay if we're in the tent. So anyways, we got into town later that day or during that afternoon, and I actually picked up a mountain lion tag because turns out it was mountain lion season is open. So we're like, well, if we see it, we're going to take it. So we're driving around for a little while. We come back into camp. We're eating lunch, and that gentleman rolls into camp again. And so we're talking with him, conversing, formalities. Hi, how you doing? Where are you from? And all that. And he was just saying to be extra cautious because he was like, well, the mountain lion could even be in the tree. And when he said that, my buddy and I look at each other. We're like, we didn't look in the tree when we got out of our tents last night. So there's that. Anyway, so we go on throughout our day. We do a couple more scouting adventures throughout the day. And it's getting into the evening, towards our evening scouting adventure. And we were talking to each other. We're like, hey, man, I'm just tired and sore from the day. Is there even any point staying here tonight? Because we could be sleeping in our own beds tonight, So we decided we were just going to pack it up and head home that night. And so we roll into camp about half an hour after sunset. So the sun's not up, but it's still kind of light, but it's getting dark really fast. And we just gotten out of the truck. There's nobody around. I'm starting to pick stuff up. And my buddy, he hears something in the bushes, breaking branches or moving through the brush about 60 yards away. And he was kind of concerned about it. And I was like, if it's a mountain lion, they're very sure-footed. We're not going to hear them moving through brush. It's probably just cattle, because there was a couple dozen head of cattle in our camp that afternoon when we got back for lunch. We had to scare off the cows from around our tent. So I was convinced that it was just cows. So I'm going around just packing up stuff slowly. And he's got his flashlight, and he's shining it through the bushes. And he was like, hey, I've got eye shine. And I was like, okay, let's go see. So I walked over there to where he was, and I'm looking through the trees, and sure enough, I can see two green eyes about 60 yards away from us, 50, 60 yards away from us, over by the next camp in the brush. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. However, what I do know is that with, be it any type of animal, the way to distinguish eye shine in predators versus prey, predators have the eyes on the front of their head versus prey have the eyes on the side of their head. Like if you think of like a deer or a cow or something like that, with the eyes on the side of their head, the prey have a 360-degree field of view, whereas predators don't have that. Their eyes are more centered to the front of the head. So I know that this is a predator of some sort. Now, is it a fox? Is it a coyote? Is it a wolf? Is it a bear? Is it a mountain lion? I don't know. It could be a whole host of things. Some things not as concerning as others. And where we were camping on that knob, I actually had service on my phone. So I went on Google real quick. I was like, what color is mountain lion eye shine? Turns out it's greenish yellow. We're like, okay, that's a mountain lion staring at us. What should we do? Well, there was no clear shot for either of us to take at it. Plus, it was after shooting light. So we're watching it, and we lose the eye shine. We can hear it moving through the brush, and then we catch eye shine over here, and then moving through the brush, and eye shine over here. And as it's moving, it's getting closer and closer and closer. And so essentially, it's stalking in on us. And I was like, this is pretty concerning, because it's gotten into camp multiple times before, our camp, another guy's camp. It's not afraid of people, because it's got close to that other gentleman this morning until he shot at it. And now it's coming in closer and closer to us, and it's getting darker and darker and darker. This is a big problem. And I tell my buddy, I was like, well, should we fire a shot? What should we do? We're both inclined to fire a shot at the animal. But the concern with that being, if I shoot at this animal, I want to know that I'm going to kill it in the first shot, and I don't have a clear shot at it. And I am not going to fire a shot at that mountain lion and not kill it. I don't want to upset 200-pound feline that wants to eat me, pissed off at me, even more than it already is. So it was kind of nervous. Like, we needed to pack up our camp and get our stuff out of there, but we can't just both do that because we're turning our backs and it's just going to sneak up right on us. So what we had to do was, my buddy was on his gun with his flashlight shining, and I was just taking everything out of the tents. Clothes, boots, cots, everything, not even folding anything up, just throw it in the back of the pickup. Throw it in the back of the pickup. And as I'm doing that, I've got my handgun kind of like this number. I'm picking stuff up, because what if it's on the other side of the tent? My buddy can only check out 180 degrees field of view, and it's in front of me. So what is it going to do if it pops out in front of me, you know? So we're picking stuff up, throw it in the truck. And then it gets to the tents. What we were going to do is, I was just going to sit in the back of the pickup and hold the tents. And we're going to go down the road farther away from the cat, where it was going to be safe to take everything out and put everything back in the truck. And it became apparent that we weren't going to be able to do that. So we had to switch, and I was on the light and had my gun watching for the cat. As he takes the tent stakes out of his tent, we didn't fold anything up. We just took the tent stakes out, threw the tents in the back of the pickup, just everything in there. And there wasn't any room in the cab of the pickup because we had also stuffed everything in there. Again, we didn't do it organized. It was just rush, spur of the moment thing. We just threw everything in there to get the hell out of Dodge. And so I laid on the back of the pickup to keep everything down so we didn't lose anything as we're going down the road. And we got out of there. We went down into town, and we took everything out and organized everything. But the reason I'm sharing this story with you is for a few things. I learned a few things in this scenario. Number one, I'm an avid outdoorsman. I've been out in the outdoors since I could walk, and I've been hunting for over a decade in the specific area. And I guess I just didn't have an appreciation that even though I have a rifle or a gun in my hands at all time, I'm not at the top of the food chain. This is still the great outdoors. So that was a bit of a humbling experience for me. Another thing, don't ever go into the woods by yourself alone. I don't know how many people do this, and it always boggles my mind. It's like, what happens? Even if you just trip and roll your ankle or you break your ankle or something silly like that, you don't have anybody to haul you out. If my buddy wasn't there, or if I wasn't there, it's just one of us, this situation could have turned out very, very, very different. Next thing, even though I have a handgun, I have smaller hands. This is just a 380. I got a smaller gun because I have smaller hands, smaller wrists. I can't handle a lot of recoil, and I didn't ever intend on needing to use a gun in that kind of a situation against bears. I just figured it would be a noisemaker essentially. But since this situation has come up, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to deal with it. And if I have to deal with it, I want something that's going to get the job done appropriately. And so I am actually looking for new guns. If you have a bear defense, cat defense gun, suggestions, drop them down below. 10 millimeter, 45, 44, 357, something like that. I am keeping my options open. Anyways, so even if you don't want to carry a gun with you, at least take pepper spray or bear spray. You can get it in any sporting goods store, just about any store around here, because we are Idaho. So at the minimum, take pepper spray. But even with the pepper spray, I would use that as a first defense, and I actually won't even use that as a defense at all. If I'm getting into a situation, I want to be able to sling lead in a certain direction. It's going to be way more effective than bear spray. I always say lead spray is a lot more effective than bear spray in that kind of a situation. So a lot of things to learn from this. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and I hope it keeps you out of some other situations that could possibly end up like this. If you like this story, you might like a few others that I've done on similar topics, like this one right here, or this one right here. Until next week, I'm Isaac Crace with Top Idaho Real Estate, your third generation Idaho Realtor.